Well, it's Tuesday evening. I hope you all had a good Labor Day yesterday, and we are going to read for one day out of the Old Mother West Wind book again, and then we are going to move on to a book called Hildy Cracks the Case. It's actually a series, and this is the first book in the series called Hero Dog. So she's a reporter slash mystery solver, and it's a really good, pretty easy children's fiction chapter book. So we'll do that tomorrow. This one is by Thornton W. Burgess again, and we're going to read chapter 16. It is about how Spotty the Turtle wins a race. All the little people who live on the green meadows and in the smiling pool and along the laughing brook were to have a holiday. The merry little breezes of Old Mother West Wind had been very busy, oh, very busy indeed, in sending word to all the little meadow folks. You see, Peter Rabbit had been boasting about how fast he could run. Reddy Fox was quite sure that he could run faster than Peter Rabbit. Billy Mink, who can move so quickly you can hardly see him, was quite sure that neither Peter Rabbit nor Reddy Fox could run as fast as he. They all met one day beside the Smiling Pool and agreed that old Grandfather Frog should decide who was the swiftest. Now, Grandfather Frog was accounted very wise. You see, he had lived a long, long time, much longer than any of the others, and therefore, because of the wisdom of age, Grandfather Frog was always called on to decide all disputes. He sat on his green lily pad while Billy Mink sat on the big rock, and Peter Rabbit and Reddy Fox sat on the bank. Each in turn told why he thought he was the fastest. Old Grandfather Frog listened and said never a word until they were all through. When they had finished, he stopped to catch a foolish green fly, and then he said, "The best way to decide who is the swiftest is to have a race." So it was agreed that Peter Rabbit and Reddy Fox and Billy Mink should start together from the old butternut tree on one edge of the Green Meadows, race away across the Green Meadows to the little hill on the other side, and each bring back a nut from the big hickory which grew there. The one who first reached the old butternut tree with a hickory nut would be declared the winner. The merry little breezes flew about over the Green Meadows, telling everyone about the race, and everyone planned to be there. It was a beautiful summer day. Mr. Sun smiled and smiled, and the more he smiled, the warmer it grew. Everyone was there to see the race. Striped Chipmunk, Happy Jack Squirrel, Sammy Jay, Blacky the Crow, Hooty the Owl, and Bobby Coon all sat up in the old butternut tree where it was cool and shady. Johnny Chuck, Jerry Muskrat, Jimmy Skunk, Little Joe Otter, Grandfather Frog, and even old Mr. Toad were there. Last of all came Spotty the Turtle. Now, Spotty the Turtle is a very slow walker, and he cannot run at all. When Peter Rabbit saw him coming toward the old butternut tree, he shouted, "Come, Spotty, don't you want to race with us?" Everybody laughed because you know Spotty is so very, very slow. But Spotty didn't laugh, and he didn't get cross because everyone else laughed. "There was a wise old saying, Peter Rabbit," said Spotty the Turtle, "which shows that those who ran fastest do not always reach the place first. I think I will enter this race." Everyone thought that that was the best joke that they'd heard for a long time, and all laughed harder than ever. They all agreed that Spotty the Turtle should start in the race, too. So they all stood in a row, Peter Rabbit first, then Billy Mink and Reddy Fox, and right side of Reddy Fox, Spotty the Turtle. "Are you ready?" asked Grandfather Frog. "Go." Away went Peter Rabbit with great big jumps. After him went Billy Mink so fast that was just a little brown streak going through the tall grass. And side by side with him ran Reddy Fox. Now, just as they started, Spotty the Turtle reached up and grabbed the long hair on the end of Reddy's big tail. Of course, Reddy couldn't have stopped to shake him off because Peter Rabbit and Billy Mink were running so fast that he had to run his very best to keep up with them. But he didn't even know that Spotty the Turtle was there. You see, Spotty is not very heavy, and Reddy Fox was so excited that he did not notice that his big tail was heavier than usual. The Merry Little Breezes flew along too to see that the race was fair. Peter Rabbit went with great big jumps. Whenever he came to a little bush, he jumped right over it, for Peter Rabbit's legs are long and meant for jumping. Billy Mink was so slim that he slipped between the bushes and through the long grass like a little brown streak. Reddy Fox, who's bigger than either Peter Rabbit or Billy Mink, had no trouble in keeping up with them. Not one of them noticed that Spotty the Turtle was hanging fast to the end of Reddy's tail. Now, just at the foot of the little hill on which the big hickory tree grew was a little pond. It wasn't very wide, but it was quite long. Billy Mink remembered this pond, and he chuckled to himself as he raced along, for he knew that Peter Rabbit couldn't swim, and he knew that Reddy Fox does not like water, so therefore both would have to run around it. He himself can swim even faster than he can run. The more he thought of this, the more foolish it seemed that he should hurry on such a warm day. For, said Billy Mink to himself, even if they reach the pond first, they will have to run around it. Well, I can swim across it and cool off while I'm swimming. I will surely get there first. So Billy Mink ran slower and slower, and pretty soon he dropped behind. Mr. Sun, round and red, looking down, smiled and smiled to see the race. The more he smiled, the warmer it grew. Now, Peter Rabbit had a thick gray coat, and Reddy Fox had a thick red coat, and they both began to get very, very warm. Peter Rabbit did not make such long jumps as when he first started, and Reddy Fox began to feel very thirsty, and his tongue hung out. Now that Billy Mink was behind them, they thought that they didn't need to hurry also. Peter Rabbit reached the little pond first. He had not thought of that pond when he agreed to enter the race. He stopped right on the edge of it and sat up on his hind legs. Right across he could see the big hickory tree, so near and yet so far. For he knew that he must run along around the pond and then back again. And it was a long, long way. In just a moment, Reddy Fox ran out of the bushes, and Reddy felt much as Peter Rabbit did. Way, way behind them was Billy Mink, trotting along comfortably and chuckling to himself. Peter Rabbit looked at Reddy Fox in dismay. Reddy Fox looked at Peter in dismay. Then they both looked at Billy Mink and remembered that Billy Mink could swim right across. Then off Peter Rabbit started as fast as he could go, around the pond one way, and Reddy Fox started around the pond the other way. They were so excited that neither noticed a little splash in the pond. What do you think that was? That was Spotty the Turtle, who had let go of Reddy's tail and now was swimming across the pond, for you know that Spotty is a splendid swimmer. Only once or twice he stuck his little black nose up to get some air. The rest of the time he swam underwater, and no one but the Merry Little Breezes saw him. Right across he swam and climbed up the bank, right under the big hickory tree. Now, there were just 3 nuts left under the hickory trees. 2 of these Spotty took down to the edge of the pond and buried in the mud. The other he took in his mouth and started back across the pond. Just as he reached the other shore, up trotted Billy Mink. But Billy Mink didn't see Spotty. He was too intent watching Reddy Fox and Peter Rabbit, who were now halfway around the pond. In he jumped with a splash. My, how good that cool water did feel. He didn't have to hurry now because he felt sure that the race was his. So he swam around and chased some fish and had a beautiful time in the water. By and by he looked up and saw that Peter Rabbit was almost around the pond one way, and Reddy Fox was almost around the pond the other way. They both looked tired and hot and discouraged. Then Billy Mink swam slowly across and climbed out the bank under the big hickory tree. But where were the nuts? Look as he would, he could not see a nut anywhere. Yet the Merry Little Breezes had said that there were 3 nuts lying under the hickory tree. Billy Mink ran this way and ran that way. He was still running around, poking over the leaves and looking under the twigs and pieces of bark when Peter Rabbit and Reddy Fox came up. Then they too began to look under the leaves and under the bark. They pawed around in the grass, they hunted in every nook and cranny, but not a nut could they find. They were tired and cross and hot, and they accused Billy Mink of having hidden the nuts. Billy Mink stoutly insisted that he had not hidden the nuts and that he had not found the nuts. When they saw how hard he was hunting, they believed him. All the afternoon they hunted and hunted and hunted, and all the afternoon Spotty the Turtle, with a nut in his mouth, was slowly, oh so slowly, crawling straight back across the Green Meadows, crawling straight back toward the old butternut tree. Round Mr. Sun was getting very close to the Purple Hills, where he goes to bed every night, and all the little meadow folk were getting ready to go to their homes. They were wondering and wondering what could have happened to the racers, when Sammy Jay spied the Merry Little Breezes dancing across the Green Meadows. "Here come the Merry Little Breezes. They'll tell us who wins the race," cried Sammy Jay. When the Merry Little Breezes reached the old butternut tree, all the little meadow folks crowded around them. But the Merry Little Breezes just laughed and wouldn't say a word. Then, all of a sudden, out of the tall meadow grass crept Spotty the Turtle and laid the hickory nut at the feet of Old Grandfather Frog. Old Grandfather Frog was so surprised that he actually let a great green fly buzz right past his nose. "Where did you get that hickory nut?" asked Grandfather Frog. "Under the big hickory tree on the hill on the other side of the Green Meadows," said Spotty. Then all the Merry Little Breezes clapped their hands and shouted, He did! Spotty wins the race!" Then they told how Spotty reached the pond by clinging to the tip of Reddy Fox's tail and had hidden the other 2 nuts, and then how he had patiently crawled home while Billy Mink, Reddy Fox, and Peter Rabbit were hunting and hunting and hunting for the nuts they could not find. And so Spotty the Turtle was awarded the race, and to this day Peter Rabbit, Reddy Fox, and Billy Mink can't bear the sight of a hickory nut. The end. Wow, what do you think of that story? I've got some mixed emotions. I don't think that I would celebrate somebody that hid the nuts, because that seems like cheating to me. What do you think? He was maybe clever, but it didn't really help them figure out who was the fastest, did it? I'm going to read one more quick story. This is called Why Reddy Fox Has No Friends. Let's see. Oh, I'm actually not going to read that story. It is way too long. I think we'll read a story called Johnny Chuck and His Secret. Johnny Chuck's Secret. Johnny Chuck pushed up the last bit of gravel from the hole he had dug between the roots of the old apple tree in a corner of the Green Meadows. He smoothed it down on the big yellow mound he had made in front of his door. Then he sat up very straight on top of the mound, brushed his coat, and shook the sand from his trousers and carefully cleaned his hands. After he'd rested a bit, he turned around and looked at his new home, for that is what it was, although he had not come to live there yet, and no one knew of it. No one but jolly round red Mr. Sun, who, peeping behind the branches of the old apple tree, had caught Johnny Chuck at work. But he wouldn't tell, not jolly Mr. Sun. Looking down from the blue sky every day, he sees all sorts of interesting things, and he learns all kinds of secrets. But does Mr. Sun? No, but he never tells. No, sir. Mr. Sun never tells one of them, not even to Old Mother West Wind, when at night they go down together behind the Purple Hills. So jolly round Mr. Sun just smiled and smiled when he discovered Johnny Chuck's secret, for that is just what the new home under the apple tree was, a secret. Not even the Merry Little Breezes, who find almost anything, had discovered it. Johnny Chuck chuckled to himself as he planned a back door, a beautiful back door, hidden behind a tall clump of meadow grass where no one would think to look for a door. When he had satisfied himself as to just where he would put it, he once more sat up very straight on his nice new mound and looked this way and looked that way to be sure that no one was near. Then he started for his home along a secret little path that he had made for himself. Pretty soon he came to the lone little path that went past his own home. He danced and he skipped along the lone little path, and because he was so happy, he tried to turn a somersault. But Johnny Chuck was so round and fat and roly-poly that he just tumbled over in a heap. Well, what's the matter with you?" said a voice close beside him before he could pick himself up. It was Jimmy Skunk, who was out looking for some beetles for his dinner. Johnny Chuck scrambled to his feet and looked foolish, very foolish indeed. "There's nothing the matter with me, Jimmy Skunk," said Johnny. "There's nothing the matter with me. It's just because I've got a secret." "A secret?" cried Jimmy Skunk. "What is it?" "Yes, a secret, a really truly secret," said Johnny Chuck, and looked very important. "Tell me, Johnny Chuck, come on, just tell me, and then we'll have a secret together," begged Jimmy Skunk. Now, Johnny Chuck was so tickled with his secret that it seemed as if he must share it with someone. He just couldn't keep it to himself any longer. "You won't tell anyone?" said Johnny Chuck. Jimmy Skunk promised that he wouldn't tell a soul. "Cross your heart," commanded Johnny Chuck. Jimmy Skunk crossed his heart. Johnny Chuck looked this way and looked that way to be sure no one was listening. Finally, he whispered in Jimmy Skunk's ear, "I've got a new home under the old apple tree in the corner of the Green Meadows," said Johnny Chuck. Of course, Jimmy Skunk was very much surprised and very much interested, so Johnny Chuck told him all about it. "Now remember, it's a secret," said Johnny Chuck, as Jimmy Skunk started off down the lone little path across the Green Meadows to look for some beetles. "I'll remember," said Jimmy Skunk. "Don't tell," called Johnny Chuck. Jimmy Skunk promised he wouldn't tell. Then Johnny Chuck started off up the lone little path, whistling, and Jimmy Skunk trotted down the lone little path to the Green Meadows. Jimmy Skunk was thinking so much about Johnny Chuck's new home that he quite forgot to look for beetles, and he almost ran into Peter Rabbit. "Hello, Jimmy Skunk," said Peter Rabbit. "Can't you see where you're going? It must be you have something on your mind. What is it?" "I was thinking of Johnny Chuck's new home," said Jimmy Skunk. "Johnny Chuck's new home!" exclaimed Peter Rabbit. "Has Johnny Chuck got a new home? Where is it?" "Under the roots of the old apple tree in a corner of the Green Meadows," said Jimmy Skunk. And then he clasped his hands over his mouth. You see, he hadn't really meant to tell. It just slipped out. "Oh, but it's a secret," cried Jimmy Skunk. "It's a secret, and you mustn't tell. I guess Jimmy Chuck won't mind if you know, Peter Rabbit, but you mustn't tell anyone else." Peter Rabbit promised he wouldn't. Now, Peter Rabbit's very inquisitive indeed. So as soon as he had parted from Jimmy Skunk, he made up his mind that he must see the new home of Johnny Chuck. So off he started as fast as he could go toward the old apple tree in the corner of the Green Meadows. Halfway there, he met Reddy Fox. "Hello, Peter Rabbit. Where are you going in such a hurry?" asked Reddy Fox. "Over to the old apple tree to see Johnny Chuck's new home," replied Peter Rabbit as he tried to dodge past Reddy Fox. Then, of a sudden, he remembered, clasped both hands over his mouth, and said, "Oh, but it's a secret, Reddy Fox. It's a secret, and you mustn't tell," cried Peter Rabbit. But Reddy Fox wouldn't promise that he wouldn't tell. For in spite of his handsome coat and fine manners, Reddy Fox is a scamp. And besides, he has no love for Johnny Chuck, for he had not forgotten how Johnny Chuck once made him run and called him a fraidy cat. So when Reddy Fox left Peter Rabbit, he grinned a wicked grin and hurried off to find Bobby Coon. He met him on his way to the Laughing Brook. Reddy Fox told Bobby Coon all about Johnny Chuck's secret and then hurried away after Peter Rabbit, for Reddy Fox is also very inquisitive. Bobby Coon went on down to the Laughing Brook, and there he met Billy Mink and told him about the new home of Johnny Chuck that he had made under the old apple tree in the corner of the Green Meadows. Pretty soon Billy Mink met Little Joe Otter and told him, and then Little Joe Otter met Jerry Muskrat and told him. Jerry Muskrat saw Blacky Crow and told him, and Great-Grandfather Frog heard him. Blacky the Crow met his first cousin, Sammy Jay, and told him. Sammy Jay met Happy Jack Squirrel and told him. Happy Jack met his cousin, Striped Chipmunk, and told him. Striped Chipmunk passed the house of Old Mr. Toad and told him. The next morning, very early, before Old Mother West Wind had come down from the Purple Hills, Johnny Chuck stole over to his new home and began to work on his new back door. He had hardly begun to dig when he heard someone cough right behind him. He whirled around, and there sat Peter Rabbit, looking as innocent and surprised as if he had really just discovered the new home for the first time. "What a splendid new home you have, Johnny Chuck," said Peter Rabbit. "Yes," said Johnny Chuck slowly. "It's a secret," he added suddenly. "You won't tell, will you, Peter Rabbit?" Peter Rabbit promised that he wouldn't tell. Then Johnny Chuck felt better and went back to work as soon as Peter Rabbit left. He had hardly begun, however, when someone else, just above him, said, "Good morning, Johnny Chuck." Johnny Chuck looked up, and there in the old apple tree sat Blacky the Crow and his cousin, Sammy Jay. But just then there was a rustle in the grass, and out popped Billy Mink. and Little Joe Otter, Jerry Muskrat, Happy Jack Squirrel, Striped Chipmunk, and Bobby Coon. When Johnny Chuck had recovered from his surprise and looked over to the doorway of his new home, there sat Reddy Fox on Johnny Chuck's precious new mound. It seemed as if all the little meadow people were there, all but Jimmy Skunk, who wisely stayed away. "We've come to see your new home," said Striped Chipmunk, "and we think it's the nicest home we've seen for a long time." "It's so nicely hidden away, it's really quite a secret," said Reddy Fox, grinning wickedly. Just then, up raced the Merry Little Breezes, and one of them had a message for Johnny Chuck from Great-Grandfather Frog. It was this: "Whisper a secret to a friend, and you shout it in the ear of the whole world." After everyone had admired the new home, they said goodbye and scattered over the Green Meadows. Then Johnny Chuck began to dig again, but this time he wasn't making his new back door. No, indeed. Johnny Chuck was digging at that new mound of yellow gravel of which he had been so proud. Jolly, round Mr. Sun blinked to be sure that he saw all right, for Johnny Chuck was filling up his new home between the roots of the old apple tree. When he got through, there wasn't any new home. Then Johnny Chuck bristled his coat carefully, shook the sand out of his trousers, wiped his hands, and started off for his old home. And this time he didn't take a special hidden path, for Johnny Chuck didn't care who saw him go. Late that afternoon, Johnny Chuck sat on his old doorstep with his chin in his hands, watching Old Mother West Wind gathering her Merry Little Breezes into the big bag in which she carries them to her home behind the purple hills. Whisper a secret to a friend, and you shout it into the ear of the whole world. Now, what did Grandfather Frog mean by that? Thought Johnny Chuck. Now, I didn't tell anybody but Jimmy Skunk, and Jimmy Skunk didn't tell anybody but Peter Rabbit, and... Then Johnny Chuck began to chuckle, and finally to laugh. Whisper a secret to a friend, and you shout it in the ear of the whole world. My gracious, what a loud voice I must have had, and I didn't know it, said Johnny Chuck, wiping the tears of laughter from his eyes. The next day, Johnny Chuck started to make a new home. Where? Oh, that's Johnny Chuck's secret, and no one but jolly, round, red Mr. Sun has found it out yet. Well, that's it for today. I hope you all enjoyed our stories from Old Mother West Wind, and we will look forward to seeing you tomorrow with our mystery called Hero Dog. Hildy Cracks the Case. Have a great night. Bye.